The harsh Sahelian sun cast its first rays across the sprawling military complex of Camp Sangoulay La Mizana, Ouagadougou's primary military installation. Captain Ibrahim Traoré emerged from his modest quarters at precisely 0500 hours, as was his custom for the past 7 years of dedicated service. At 34, his lean frame carried the confidence of a man who had earned respect through merit rather than connections, a rarity in the current military hierarchy. The compound was already stirring with activity. Early morning prayers echoed from the mosque adjacent to the base, while street vendors began setting up their stalls outside the main gates. The familiar sounds of motorcycles weaving through traffic created a symphony of urban awakening that Ibrahim had grown to appreciate during his time in the capital. His morning inspection route was methodical and thorough. Ibrahim moved through the barracks with practiced efficiency, noting equipment status, personnel readiness, and the general morale of his men. The soldiers under his command respected him for his fairness and integrity, qualities that seemed increasingly scarce among the officer corps. Captain Traoré, a voice called from behind as he completed his review of the communications center. Ibrahim turned to see Lieutenant Ouedraogo approaching at a quick pace, a manila folder clutched against his chest. The young officer's usually composed demeanor showed signs of agitation. "Sir, I have the intelligence report you requested," Ouedraogo announced, his voice carefully controlled despite the early hour. Ibrahim nodded and gestured toward his office. "Walk with me, Lieutenant. The morning briefing isn't for another hour." They crossed the courtyard, passing the flagpole where the green, yellow, and red colors of Burkina Faso hung motionless in the still air. Ibrahim's office occupied a corner of the administrative building, a Spartanly furnished room that reflected his practical nature. Maps of Burkina Faso dominated the walls, marked with red pins indicating mineral deposits throughout the northeastern regions. The country's wealth was laid bare in those pins. Gold mines that had become the backbone of the national economy, manganese deposits that attracted foreign investment, and scattered markers indicating potential oil reserves. But it was the newest additions to the map, discrete diamond symbols near the Tambao region, that commanded his attention this morning. Ibrahim settled behind his metal desk, its surface clear except for a framed photograph of his late father in military uniform and a small Burkinabe flag. "What have you found, Lieutenant?" Ouedraogo placed the folder on the desk and opened it to reveal satellite imagery and reconnaissance reports. "Sir, it's as you suspected. There's been unusual activity near the Tambao region over the past 2 weeks. Several unscheduled convoys moving under military escort, but with no corresponding documentation in the official transport logs. The satellite images showed vehicle movements along remote desert roads, heavy trucks, accompanied by armed escorts following routes that deliberately avoided established checkpoints." Ibrahim studied the photographs with growing concern, his military training immediately recognizing the pattern of clandestine operations. "These convoys," Ibrahim pointed to tire tracks visible in the sand, "they're following routes designed to avoid detection. Who authorized these movements?" Ouedraogo hesitated before answering, clearly uncomfortable with the implications of his discovery. "That's what concerns me most, sir. The authorizations carry Captain Dio's signature, but they weren't processed through normal military channels. The paperwork appears legitimate at first glance, but there are inconsistencies in the serial numbers and authentication codes." Ibrahim's frown deepened. Captain Marcel Dio was one of the most decorated officers in the Burkinabe military, a veteran of peacekeeping missions who had earned commendations for his service in Mali and Ivory Coast. He was also responsible for resource security operations throughout the Northern Territories, a position that gave him significant autonomy in authorizing military movements. "Lieutenant," Ibrahim said, leaning forward, "there's something else, isn't there? I can see it in your expression." Ouedraogo nodded reluctantly. 3 nights ago, Dr. Amadou Sanfo was found dead in his home in Ouagadougou. The official police report lists it as a robbery gone wrong, but sir, Dr. Sanfo was the lead geologist on the Tambao Diamond Survey. He had been working on updated assessments of the mineral deposits in that region. The pieces of a disturbing puzzle began forming in Ibrahim's mind. Dr. Sanfo had been one of the few scientists with complete knowledge of Tambao's geological wealth. His death, following so closely after the suspicious military convoys, suggested a connection that went beyond mere coincidence. Ibrahim studied the convoy schedule that Ouedraogo had included in the report. "There's another convoy scheduled for tomorrow night," the lieutenant pointed to a highlighted entry. "Heavily armed escort, moving from Tambao to the Mali border under cover of darkness." The route map showed a path that deliberately skirted official border crossings, heading instead toward a region notorious for its porous boundaries and limited government control. It was the perfect corridor for smuggling operations. Remote, poorly monitored, and with local populations more loyal to tribal affiliations than national authorities. "Thank you, Lieutenant. This stays between us for now," Ibrahim instructed, closing the folder. "I need to make some inquiries through unofficial channels." After Ouedraogo departed, Ibrahim sat alone in his office, considering the implications of what he had learned. If his suspicions were correct, someone was orchestrating a systematic theft of Burkina Faso's mineral wealth. The discovery of significant diamond deposits at Tambao had been classified information known only to a select group of government officials and military leaders. The fact that someone was potentially exploiting this knowledge for personal gain represented a betrayal of the highest order. Ibrahim pulled out his personal mobile phone and dialed a number he rarely used. After 3 rings, a familiar, gruff voice answered. "Ibrahim, my friend, it's been too long. How are things in the capital?" "Musa, I need your assistance," Ibrahim replied, dispensing with pleasantries. "Are you anywhere near the Tambao region?" Musa Konate had been Ibrahim's roommate during their time at the military academy in Kadiogo. Unlike Ibrahim, who had chosen to remain in uniform, Musa had left the military after completing his service and now worked as a mining security consultant. His work had taken him throughout the Sahel region, establishing contacts within artisanal mining communities and developing expertise in resource security. "You're in luck, brother. I'm currently in Dori consulting on a project for a Canadian mining company. What do you need?" Eyes and ears at the Tambao site tonight. There's military activity that doesn't appear on any official schedules. There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Musa spoke again, his tone had become serious. "Ibrahim, what exactly are you looking into? The Tambao region has been sensitive since those geological surveys were completed." "That's precisely what concerns me. Can you help?" "Of course, but be careful, my friend. You're stepping into territory that makes powerful people very uncomfortable." After ending the call, Ibrahim returned his attention to the maps on his wall. Burkina Faso's mineral wealth was both a blessing and a curse. Countries throughout the Sahel region had struggled to convert natural resources into sustainable development, often falling victim to corruption and foreign exploitation. He had dedicated his career to ensuring that Burkina Faso would avoid that fate. That evening, Ibrahim sat in his modest apartment in the Curta district, reviewing his service record spread across his kitchen table. 7 years of active duty, including 18 months fighting insurgents in the northern provinces, deployment with UN peacekeepers in Mali, and multiple commendations for bravery under fire. His dedication to Burkina Faso had never wavered, even as he witnessed colleagues succumb to the temptations of corruption that plagued many West African militaries. The apartment reflected his Spartan lifestyle: functional furniture, a small collection of books on military history and African politics, and photographs documenting his service. On the wall hung a citation from his deployment in Mali, where he had led a successful operation to rescue civilian hostages from militant groups. His phone buzzed with a text message from Musa. "Confirmed. 6 trucks loaded at Tambao tonight. Military escort with non-standard uniforms. Convoy departing at dawn. Ibrahim closed his eyes, feeling the weight of confirmation settling on his shoulders. Tomorrow would change everything. He would either prevent a massive theft of national resources or expose himself as a traitor to a superior officer. Either way, there would be no turning back. He thought of his father, Colonel Ibrahim Traoré, who had served with distinction during the country's transition to democracy. His father had instilled in him an unwavering commitment to service and integrity. A soldier's greatest weapon, his father had often said, is not his rifle, but his conscience. As he prepared for what lay ahead, Ibrahim composed a detailed letter to his sister Aminata, explaining his actions and motivations. If something happened to him, he wanted his family to understand that he had acted not from ambition or recklessness, but from a deep love for his country and its people. The letter complete, he secured it in an envelope addressed to Aminata in Bobo Dioulasso, where she worked as a teacher. It would serve as both explanation and testament should events turn against him. Dawn broke crimson over the eastern horizon as Ibrahim maneuvered his military jeep through the quiet streets of Ouagadougou. He had departed the capital before first light, informing only Lieutenant Ouedraogo of his destination and timeline. The lieutenant had wanted to accompany him, but Ibrahim had ordered him to remain in Ouagadougou with instructions to contact General Sanu if Ibrahim failed to report in by evening. The landscape transformed gradually as he drove northeast from the capital. The relatively green outskirts of Ouagadougou, fed by the Nakambe River, gave way to increasingly arid terrain that marked Burkina Faso's Sahel region. Acacia trees dotted the landscape, their thorny branches providing meager shade for livestock and wildlife. Villages appeared and disappeared alongside the paved road, each a small community trying to maintain traditional ways of life in the face of modernization and climate challenges. Women carrying water jugs balanced gracefully on their heads, children waving enthusiastically as his military vehicle passed by, and men tending to cattle and goats. These were the people he had sworn to protect, whose future depended on the proper stewardship of the country's resources. His phone rang as he approached Dori, the regional capital and last major town before the more remote mining areas. The caller was Musa, his voice urgent despite the crackling connection. "Ibrahim, where are you?" "Just reaching Dori." "What's the situation?" "The convoy departed Tambao an hour ago. 6 heavy trucks with 2 escort vehicles. They're taking the northern route through Gorom, then turning west toward the Mali border. If you hurry, you can intercept them at the Beli River crossing. It's the only point where loaded trucks can pass safely through that terrain." Ibrahim accelerated, the jeep bouncing violently on the increasingly deteriorated road surface. "How many men in the escort?" "I counted 12, all armed with automatic weapons. They're moving slowly because of the truck loads, but they're not expecting interference. And Ibrahim, there's no sign of Captain Dio. This appears to be just the operational team." The Beli River crossing was nearly 2 hours away by road, and the convoy had a significant head start. However, their heavy loads would force them to travel slowly on the rough terrain, giving Ibrahim a chance to reach the intercept point first. As he drove through increasingly remote territory, Ibrahim's mind raced through potential scenarios and their consequences. If he was wrong about the convoy's purpose, his career would be over. But if he was right, the stakes were far higher than professional disgrace. Men engaged in stealing millions of dollars worth of diamonds would not hesitate to eliminate obstacles, including military officers who posed a threat to their operations. The terrain grew more challenging as he left the main road, following tracks that were little more than paths worn by occasional traffic. His GPS device struggled to maintain accurate positioning in the remote area, forcing him to rely on paper maps and compass navigation, skills honed during his military training. The Belly River crossing consisted of a low concrete bridge spanning a seasonal watercourse that was currently dry except for scattered pools. The surrounding landscape offered excellent visibility in all directions, an advantage for surveillance but providing little cover if the situation turned violent. Ibrahim positioned his jeep to block the narrow crossing point, then retrieved his binoculars and assault rifle from the vehicle. The sun was approaching its zenith, and heat waves shimmered off the concrete and sand. He settled into a position behind his vehicle and waited. At approximately 11:30 hours, a dust cloud appeared on the northern horizon. Through his binoculars, Ibrahim could identify 6 heavy trucks in convoy formation with a jeep leading and another bringing up the rear. The vehicles moved slowly, clearly carrying substantial loads that affected their mobility on the rough terrain. As the convoy approached, Ibrahim started his engine and positioned his jeep directly across the bridge, creating an unmistakable roadblock. He stepped out of the vehicle, rifle in hand but not aimed, and waited for the convoy's response. The lead escort vehicle spotted the obstacle and slowed, then stopped approximately 50 meters from the bridge. Ibrahim could observe, the occupants conferring, obviously surprised to encounter a military officer in this remote location. After several minutes of discussion, the jeep approached slowly, while the trucks remained stationary. Ibrahim recognized the driver as Sergeant Konate, one of Captain Dio's subordinates. The sergeant's expression revealed a mixture of surprise and concern as he brought his vehicle to a halt. "Captain Traoré," Konate called through his open window, forcing a smile. "This is unexpected. What brings you to this remote area?" "I might ask you the same question, Sergeant," Ibrahim replied, maintaining a professional tone. "This convoy doesn't appear on any official transport schedules that I've reviewed." Konate's smile became more forced. "Special operations, sir. Captain Dio's direct orders. We're transporting mining equipment to northern outposts." "Mining equipment. Requires 6 heavy trucks and an armed escort?" Ibrahim questioned, raising an eyebrow. "And taking an unauthorized route toward the Mali border?" The sergeant's composure wavered slightly. "Sir, I suggest you contact Captain Dio directly if you have concerns about our mission. We have our orders and a schedule to maintain. I'm afraid I cannot permit you to proceed without proper documentation, Sergeant," Ibrahim stated firmly. "If national resources are leaving Burkina Faso without authorization, that constitutes both theft and smuggling." Konate's hand moved subtly toward his sidearm. "With all due respect, Captain, you're alone out here. I suggest you step aside and forget what you've seen." "It would be the wise course of action." Ibrahim slightly raised his rifle, not quite aiming but making his readiness clear. "Actually, Sergeant, this position is being monitored by my people. Reinforcements are already en route. Your best option is to surrender the convoy and cooperate with the investigation that will inevitably follow." It was a calculated bluff, but delivered with the confidence of truth. Ibrahim watched as Konate weighed his options, glancing between Ibrahim and the distant horizon where no rescue would actually materialize. The tension stretched for several heartbeats before Konate's shoulders slumped in resignation. "The men won't surrender easily," he admitted quietly. "They've been promised substantial payments for completing this job. Tell them that cooperation now will result in leniency later," Ibrahim responded. "Resistance will mean charges of treason against Burkina Faso." As Konate radioed his men to stand down, Ibrahim approached the lead truck with growing anticipation and dread. The nervous civilian driver handed over his keys without protest, avoiding eye contact. Ibrahim climbed into the cargo area and used a crowbar from the truck's toolbox to pry open one of the wooden crates. Inside, contrary to the markings indicating mining equipment, he discovered carefully packed ore samples. Another crate revealed small cloth bags containing rough diamonds nestled in protective padding. The estimated value of just this single truck's cargo could fund the construction of dozens of schools or medical clinics. "Sergeant Konate," Ibrahim called as he jumped. Down from the truck, "These are unregistered diamonds being transported without proper documentation. This is exactly the theft I suspected." Konate's expression showed defeat mixed with fear. "Captain, you don't understand the complete picture. This operation has been running for months." "Then explain it to me. Who's behind this? It's obviously not just you and your squad." Before Konate could respond, Ibrahim's phone rang. The caller was Musa, his voice urgent and concerned. "Ibrahim, you need to leave that position immediately. I've just received word that Captain Dio has been informed of your interference. He's dispatched a helicopter from Dori with additional personnel. They'll reach your location in less than 20 minutes. The gravity of the situation hit Ibrahim. Immediately, a helicopter response meant that Dio was willing to commit significant resources to protect this operation, including potential direct confrontation with a fellow officer. The stakes had escalated far beyond what Ibrahim had initially anticipated. "How long has this smuggling operation been active?" Ibrahim demanded of Konate. "Since the initial diamond discovery at Tambao 6 months ago," the sergeant replied reluctantly. "The official geological reports deliberately downplay the extent of the deposits. Captain Dio has been working with private buyers to move diamonds out of the country before the government establishes proper regulatory controls." The distant sound of approaching helicopter rotors confirmed Musa's warning. Ibrahim had minutes to make critical decisions that would determine not only his fate, but potentially the future of Burkina Faso's diamond resources. "Get your men back in their vehicles," Ibrahim ordered Konate. "We're moving this entire convoy to that depression." He pointed to a ravine approximately 1 kilometer away where the vehicles could be concealed from aerial surveillance. As the convoy repositioned under Ibrahim's direction, he used his satellite phone to contact Lieutenant Ouedraogo in Ouagadougou. "Lieutenant, I need you to contact General Sanu immediately. Inform him that Captain Dio is orchestrating a diamond smuggling operation from Tambao. I've intercepted a convoy near the Mali border and have evidence of the theft. Dio is currently deploying armed personnel to recover the diamonds." Ouedraogo's voice crackled through the connection. "Sir, those are serious accusations against a superior officer." "I'm aware of the implications, Lieutenant. That's precisely why I need the general involved immediately. This goes far beyond ordinary corruption. We're talking about the systematic theft of resources worth millions of dollars." "I'll contact General Sanu directly, sir, but it may take considerable time for reinforcements to reach your position." "Understood. Do what you can. I'll maintain my position as long as possible." The helicopter appeared as a dark speck against the pale desert sky, growing larger as it approached the Bailey River crossing. Ibrahim had successfully moved the convoy into the ravine, but he knew that concealment was temporary. Captain Dio would not abandon such a valuable operation without a fight. Ibrahim directed his men to defensive positions while keeping Konate and the other smugglers under guard. The helicopter circled the area once before settling down approximately 200 meters from the hidden convoy. Through the swirling dust kicked up by the rotors, Ibrahim could identify Captain Marcel Dio in military uniform, accompanied by 4 armed personnel. As the helicopter's engines wound down, an ominous silence fell over the desert landscape. Ibrahim stepped out from behind cover, his rifle ready but not raised, and waited for Dio to approach. Captain Dio emerged from the aircraft with measured steps, his polished uniform and confident bearing reflecting his senior rank and authority. His face showed cold fury as he recognized Ibrahim's role in disrupting the operation. "Captain Traoré," Dio called out, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "You have made a serious mistake today." Ibrahim stood his ground. "Captain Dio, I've inspected the convoy cargo, unregistered diamonds being transported without documentation and avoiding official checkpoints. This isn't an authorized security operation, it's organized theft." Dio's expression hardened further. "You always..." We're idealistic, Traoré. Perhaps it's time you learned how the real world operates. The real world includes accountability for stealing from the people of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim replied steadily. Is that what you think this is about? Dio laughed harshly. Look around you, Captain. This country is rich in resources, yet our people remain impoverished. The system doesn't work. At least my approach ensures that some benefit reaches those willing to take initiative. By some, you mean yourself and your associates, Ibrahim countered. How does smuggling diamonds help Burkina Faso's development? Dio's facade of justification began to crack. I'm being pragmatic. These resources disappear into government coffers or foreign corporate accounts regardless. My way simply redistributes some of the wealth to people who understand its value. I've already contacted General Sanu, Ibrahim informed him. He's aware of the convoy, the diamonds, everything. This operation is finished. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Dio's features before being replaced by cold calculation. Sanu is in Ouagadougou, Captain. We're here, hours from any official response. By the time any investigation materializes, this situation will have been resolved. The implicit threat was unmistakable. Ibrahim glanced at Konate and the other men, trying to assess where their loyalties would fall if the confrontation turned violent. Your men know this is wrong, Ibrahim addressed the assembled soldiers. They joined the military to serve Burkina Faso, not to become criminals and smugglers. My men understand reality, Dio countered, turning to face his followers. They have families to support and futures to consider. Captain Traoré represents outdated idealism. I represent practical opportunity. Ibrahim saw doubt in some faces, resolve in others. The next few moments would determine whether the situation could be resolved peacefully or would escalate to violence. The distant rumble of approaching vehicles interrupted the tense standoff. All heads turned to see two military jeeps racing. Across the desert, dust clouds billowing behind them. Ibrahim recognized the lead vehicle. It belonged to Colonel Ouattara, the regional military commander based in Dori. Dio's face paled as he realized the implications of the colonel's unexpected arrival. As I mentioned, Captain Dio, I wasn't working alone, Ibrahim said calmly. Lieutenant Wedreogo contacted not only General Sanu but also Colonel Ouattara. Your influence apparently doesn't extend as far as you believed. The approaching vehicles came to abrupt stops, and Colonel Ouattara emerged accompanied by 6 armed soldiers who quickly established a perimeter around the assembled group. The colonel's weathered face showed grim determination as he surveyed the scene. Captain Dio, Ouattara announced, his voice cutting through the desert air. I received disturbing reports about unauthorized movement of national resources. I see those reports were entirely accurate. Dio attempted to regain his composure and authority. Colonel, this is a misunderstanding. I was conducting a legitimate security operation. Save your explanations for the formal inquiry, Ouattara interrupted sharply. My personnel will secure this convoy and escort everyone back to Dori. General Sanu is already en route from Ouagadougou. Dio's men lowered their weapons, recognizing the futility of resistance against superior numbers and legitimate authority. Dio himself stood rigidly as his carefully constructed operation collapsed around him. This isn't finished, Traoré, Dio muttered as Ouattara's soldiers began confiscating weapons and securing the diamond-laden trucks. Ibrahim watched as his former superior was disarmed and escorted to one of the jeeps. Beneath Dio's surface anger, Ibrahim detected something else: fear. Whatever promises Dio had made to buyers across the border, those arrangements were now exposed. There would be consequences extending far beyond military discipline. Colonel Ouattara approached Ibrahim as the scene was being secured. Captain Traoré, General Sanu speaks very highly of your integrity. It appears his confidence was well placed. Thank you, Colonel. Though I regret that such discoveries were necessary, corruption is a disease that must be excised regardless of how painful the procedure might be. Ouattara surveyed the convoy of diamond-laden trucks. The value here is extraordinary. Many men would have been tempted by such wealth. Ibrahim thought of the villages he had passed during his journey, of the children who had waved at his vehicle, of the future that these resources could help build if properly managed. Some things are worth more than diamonds, Colonel. 3. Days after the confrontation at the Bailey River crossing, Ibrahim found himself in a sterile conference room at military headquarters in Ouagadougou. The debriefing had continued for hours, with Ibrahim providing detailed accounts of his investigation and the subsequent interception of the diamond convoy. Across the mahogany table, General Sanu listened with grave attention, occasionally making notes in a leather-bound notebook. At 62, the general was a respected veteran who had navigated multiple political transitions while maintaining his reputation for integrity. His weathered face revealed little as Ibrahim concluded his comprehensive report. Captain Dio remains. In military custody? Ibrahim inquired. For now, General Sanu replied, setting down his gold pen. However, this case involves significant political complications. Ibrahim felt a chill at the general's measured tone. What type of complications, sir? Sanu sighed heavily, suddenly appearing every year of his age. Political ones, Captain. Dio has connections throughout the government hierarchy. Some officials are suggesting that his actions, while irregular in procedure, were part of a legitimate security operation designed to prevent diamond resources from falling into insurgent hands. That's completely false, Ibrahim responded, struggling to maintain military protocol. The diamonds were being smuggled to private buyers across international borders. There was no security justification whatsoever. I agree completely, but perception and reality often diverge in sensitive political matters. Sanu leaned forward intently. You've opened an extremely sensitive case, Captain. The Tambao diamond deposits are far more extensive than public reports. Acknowledge, their proper development could fundamentally transform our national economy, which makes it even more critical to ensure they aren't stolen, Ibrahim insisted. Absolutely. However, there are powerful interests who prefer discreet management of these resources, people who don't appreciate direct confrontation or public exposure. Ibrahim understood the implicit warning. Are you suggesting I should withdraw from this investigation, sir? I'm suggesting extreme caution. You've performed your duty admirably, but the investigation has now been transferred to military police and appropriate civilian authorities. With respect, General, if those authorities are compromised by the same connections that initially protected Dio, justice may not be served. Sanu studied him for a long moment. Your concerns are noted, Captain. For the immediate future, I'm assigning you to temporary duties at the Northern Command Center in Dori. This will keep you close to the Tambao region while removing you from immediate political pressures here in the capital. Ibrahim recognized the assignment for what it represented, part protection, part exile. When do I depart? Tomorrow morning. Colonel Ouattara will provide specific briefings upon your arrival. Sanu rose, indicating the meeting's conclusion. Captain Traoré, your actions reflect the highest ideals of military service. Remember that principle, regardless of what developments follow. The following evening in Dori, Ibrahim sat across from Colonel Ouattara in the regional military headquarters. The colonel's office was functional but comfortable, with detailed maps of northeastern Burkina Faso covering the walls and a large ceiling fan providing relief from the persistent heat. Welcome to the Northern Command, Captain, Ouattara said, warmly. Your reputation precedes you. Thank you, sir. I'm ready to serve in whatever capacity you require. Ouattara opened a desk drawer and withdrew a thick manila folder. Before we discuss your official duties, there are matters you should be aware of. The diamond smuggling operation you uncovered was not isolated. He opened the folder to reveal dozens of incident reports, transport manifests, and intelligence summaries. Over the past year, we've documented numerous irregularities in resource extraction and transport throughout the region. Individually, each seemed minor. Small discrepancies in shipment weights, occasional unauthorized movements, equipment, disappearing from inventory logs. Ibrahim examined the documents, noting patterns and connections that painted a disturbing picture. These incidents span multiple mining operations and jurisdictions. The coordination required would be substantial. Precisely. Too extensive for a single corrupt officer to manage independently. This suggests systematic organization with coordination from multiple levels of authority. Ouattara's expression grew grave. I've spent 30 years serving this country, watching it struggle against poverty despite abundant natural wealth. I'm too close to retirement to risk my position through direct action, but I can support officers willing to take principled stands. Why share this with me, Colonel? The information could be dangerous for both of us, because you've already demonstrated your commitment to truth over personal safety, and because Burkina Faso needs officers like you if we're going to break these cycles of corruption. Ibrahim spent the remainder of the evening studying the intelligence files, identifying networks of exploitation that extended far beyond Captain Dio's diamond operation. Names appeared repeatedly throughout the reports. Government officials, foreign mining executives, private security contractors, forming a web of systematic resource theft. The next evening, Ibrahim made his way to Café Hamatan near Dori's, central market for his scheduled meeting with journalist Fatima Zongo. The open-air establishment bustled with evening patrons enjoying tea and conversation as temperatures cooled with sunset. Ibrahim selected a corner table with clear sight lines. 2 entrances and waited. At precisely 1900 hours, a woman entered, mid-30s, professionally dressed in traditional Burkinabe fabric, scanning the cafe before spotting Ibrahim and approaching directly. "Captain Traoré," she said, extending her hand. "Fatima Zongo, thank you for agreeing to meet. Miss Zongo, please understand that I cannot comment officially on ongoing investigations. Of course, perhaps we can discuss regional resource security more generally, for background purposes only." Ibrahim nodded, recognizing the professional courtesy. "That seems acceptable." Fatima ordered tea from a server before turning her full attention to Ibrahim. "Your actions at the border crossing have caused considerable disturbance in certain circles, Captain. Captain Dio had powerful protectors who are now scrambling to distance themselves from his activities. You seem remarkably well informed about military matters. I specialize in investigative reporting focused on resource governance and corruption throughout the Sahel region. It's an area of particular concern for our listeners." She sipped her tea thoughtfully. "What troubles me is that while Dio may face consequences, the underlying system that enabled his operation remains essentially intact." Ibrahim chose his words carefully. Systems can indeed be resistant to change, especially when they benefit those in positions of power. Fatima leaned forward slightly. "Captain, I've spent 3 years investigating suspicious patterns in mining operations across West Africa, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, all countries rich in natural resources, yet struggling with governance challenges. My research suggests a transnational network exploiting these institutional weaknesses for enormous profit. Those are significant allegations requiring substantial evidence." She produced a folded document from her notebook and slid it across the table. "These are dates and locations of unexplained cross-border shipments. Note the correlation with Captain Dio's international travel schedule." Ibrahim studied the information carefully. The pattern was unmistakable. Dio's trips to European capitals aligned perfectly with large shipments leaving Burkina Faso through irregular channels. "How did you obtain this information?" "I protect my sources, Captain, just as I would protect you if you chose to share information that might advance public understanding of these issues." Ibrahim returned the document. "As I mentioned, I cannot comment on official investigations. I understand completely." She carefully stored the paper. "However, let me share something that might concern you personally. 2 days ago, a former mining executive was found dead in his Ouagadougou apartment. Alexis Cohn, previously employed by Franco-African Mining Corporation. Official cause of death, heart attack. And you find this suspicious?" Considering he had scheduled a meeting with investigative journalists to discuss irregularities at mining sites, yes, I find the timing deeply concerning. Her professional demeanor couldn't entirely mask genuine worry. Captain, people connected to this case are facing serious risks, including you. Ibrahim thought of Ouedraogo's report of intimidation attempts and General Sanu's warnings about powerful interests. What exactly are you proposing? Mutual cooperation. You have access and authority I lack. I have information and publishing platforms that might prove useful to you. She handed him a business card. If you decide that justice matters, more than protocol, contact me anytime, day or night. After Fatima departed, Ibrahim remained at the cafe considering their conversation and the broader implications of his investigation. The journalist had confirmed his growing understanding that Dio's operation was merely one component of a much larger systematic exploitation of Burkina Faso's resources. As he walked back through Dori's dimly lit streets toward the military compound, Ibrahim sensed surveillance from the shadows, whether real or imagined. The sensation reinforced the warnings he had received from multiple sources. The following week brought news that would validate his concerns and vindicate his actions. General Sanu established a special commission with extraordinary investigative powers, tasked with exposing the full extent of resource theft and corruption. Ibrahim was appointed to lead the operational component of this commission, a recognition of his integrity and the trust placed in his judgment. Standing before the assembled military council in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim accepted his new responsibilities with characteristic humility and determination. The road ahead would be challenging and dangerous, as those implicated in the corruption network would fight back with every resource at their disposal. But for the first time since uncovering the diamond smuggling operation, Ibrahim felt the full support of Burkina Faso's people behind him. Ordinary citizens who deserved leaders committed to serving the nation rather than enriching themselves through exploitation of national resources. The diamond convoy he had intercepted represented just the beginning of a comprehensive effort to reclaim Burkina Faso's wealth for its rightful owners, the people of the nation. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Captain Ibrahim Traoré was prepared to face them, driven not by personal ambition, but by an unwavering commitment to the principles that had guided his father and that would define his own legacy of service. As he looked out over Ouagadougou from the military headquarters, Ibrahim reflected on the magnitude of the task ahead. The diamond deposits at Tambao were merely the tip of an iceberg that threatened to sink the nation's hopes for prosperity and development. His secure phone rang, interrupting his contemplation. The caller was Fatima Zongo, her voice urgent despite the late hour. Captain Traoré, I have information you need to hear immediately. My sources indicate that there's been a meeting tonight between Henri Dupont of Franco-African Mining and several high-ranking government officials. Your name was mentioned repeatedly. Ibrahim felt his stomach tighten. What kind of discussion? There are efforts underway to reassign you to a desk position in the capital, possibly even fabricate charges of exceeding your authority and interfering with strategic national interests. They're moving quickly to neutralize your investigation before it can expose the full extent of the corruption network. The next morning brought confirmation of Fatima's warning. Ibrahim was summoned to an emergency meeting with General Sanu, who appeared haggard and stressed. The general's usual composed demeanor showed cracks of frustration and political pressure. Captain, there have been developments regarding your investigation. Sanu began carefully. Certain parties are claiming that your actions at Tambao and with the convoy have damaged relationships with key international partners. Sir, those relationships were built on systematic theft of our national resources. Perhaps they deserve to be damaged. I admire your principles, Captain, but the reality is more complex. Franco-African Mining has threatened to withdraw all investments from Burkina Faso, which could cost thousands of jobs and millions in foreign currency earnings. Ibrahim studied the general's expression, recognizing the impossible position he faced. What are you telling me, sir? that your investigation has succeeded beyond perhaps what any of us anticipated. But success comes with consequences. There are powerful forces mobilizing against you and, by extension, against me for supporting you." Before Ibrahim could respond, an aide entered with an urgent message. Sanu read it quickly, his expression darkening further. "It seems Fatima Zongo has published another exposé, this time detailing the government connections to the diamond smuggling operation. The story names specific ministers and their roles in facilitating the theft." Ibrahim maintained his composure despite feeling pride in the journalist's courage. "The truth has a way of emerging, sir, regardless of attempts to suppress it." "Indeed, it does, Captain, which is why I'm making a decision that will either save both our careers or end them." Sanu stood and moved to the window overlooking the capital. "I'm authorizing you to expand your investigation to include all suspected officials, regardless of rank or political connections. Full access to military intelligence resources, unlimited authority to pursue evidence wherever it leads." The magnitude of what Sanu was proposing struck Ibrahim immediately. "Sir, that level of investigation could destabilize the entire government." "Perhaps destabilization is what this country needs, Captain. We've tried to manage corruption quietly, to work within the system, to avoid confrontation with powerful interests. The result has been the systematic theft of our national wealth while our people remain impoverished." Sanu turned back to face Ibrahim, his decision made. "You wanted to serve Burkina Faso, Captain. Now you'll have the opportunity to save it." Within 48 hours of receiving his expanded authority, Ibrahim established a task force comprising trusted officers from various military units. Lieutenant Ouedraogo was promoted to serve as his deputy, while Colonel Ouattara provided regional coordination and intelligence support. The investigation's scope expanded rapidly as they followed financial trails and communication intercepts. What emerged was a sophisticated network involving not just military personnel and government officials, but also international corporations, foreign intelligence services, and organized criminal groups operating across West Africa. The evidence revealed that Burkina Faso's mineral wealth, gold, manganese, uranium, and diamonds, had been systematically underreported and diverted for years. The profits funded everything from luxury purchases for corrupt officials to weapons for insurgent groups operating in the region. "Sir, we've identified at least 12 government ministers directly involved in the network," Lieutenant Ouedraogo reported during a secure briefing. "The documentation includes bank records, communication intercepts, and witness testimonies from mining company employees who were threatened into silence." Ibrahim studied the organizational chart they had constructed, seeing how corruption had metastasized throughout the government structure. "How high does this go, Lieutenant?" "Based on the evidence, potentially to the Vice President's office. There are financial transfers that suggest involvement at the highest levels of government." The implications were staggering. If their investigation continued to its logical conclusion, it could bring down the current administration and trigger a constitutional crisis. Yet stopping now would mean abandoning justice and allowing the systematic theft to continue. Ibrahim's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from an unknown sender. "Meet me at the old French cemetery midnight. Come alone. You're in immediate danger." Against his better judgment and despite Ouedraogo's objections, Ibrahim decided to attend the meeting. The cemetery, dating from the colonial period, was located on the outskirts of Ouagadougou, in an area that had become largely abandoned as the city expanded eastward. He arrived at the designated time to find a figure waiting among the weathered headstones, a woman in her 50s, well-dressed but nervous. "Captain Traoré, thank you for coming. I'm Dr. Marie Ouedraogo, former economic advisor to the president." Ibrahim recognized the name. Dr. Ouedraogo had resigned from her government position 6 months earlier, citing personal reasons, though rumors suggested policy disagreements with senior officials. "What do you want, Dr. Ouedraogo?" "To save your life, Captain, and possibly to save our country." She handed him a flash drive. This contains financial records and communication logs that prove the diamond smuggling operation extends to the presidency itself. President Kabore may not be directly involved, but his closest advisors certainly are. Ibrahim accepted the drive, understanding its potential significance. Why didn't you present this evidence through official channels? Because those channels are compromised. Every investigation gets buried, every witness disappears or recants their testimony. You're the first person with both the evidence and the authority to act on it. She glanced nervously around the cemetery. There's more you need to know. Tomorrow night, there's a meeting scheduled between government officials and representatives of several international mining corporations. They're planning to formalize agreements that will essentially legalize the resource extraction network under the guise of emergency economic measures. Where is this meeting taking place? The presidential palace. But, Captain, if you attempt to interfere directly, you'll be arrested or worse. These people have already killed to protect their interests. They won't hesitate to eliminate you. Ibrahim pocketed the flash drive. What do you suggest? Document everything. Create an undeniable public record. Then get that information to journalists, opposition politicians, civil society groups, anyone who can't be silenced or bought. As they spoke, the sound of approaching vehicles interrupted their conversation. Car doors slammed in the distance, followed by the sound of footsteps moving through the cemetery. They followed one of us, Dr. Ouedraogo whispered urgently. Take the drive and go. There's a back entrance through the old caretaker's section. Ibrahim drew his sidearm as flashlight beams swept through the cemetery. Come with me. No, I'll delay them. This information is more important than either of our lives. As Ibrahim reluctantly retreated through the cemetery's rear exit, he heard Dr. Ouedraogo calling out to their pursuers, claiming to be visiting her father's grave. Whether her deception would work remained to be seen, but her sacrifice had given him the opportunity to escape with potentially crucial evidence. Back at military headquarters, Ibrahim immediately began analyzing the contents of Dr. Ouedraogo's flash drive. The financial records confirmed his worst fears. The corruption network extended to the highest levels of government, with millions of dollars in resource revenues being diverted to overseas accounts. More disturbing were the communication logs, which revealed plans to eliminate key witnesses and investigators who posed threats to the operation. Ibrahim's own name appeared on a list marked for permanent resolution. He immediately contacted Fatima Zongo, arranging to transfer copies of all evidence to her for publication. If something happened to him, the truth would still emerge through her reporting. The next morning brought news that validated his precautions. Dr. Ouedraogo had been found dead in her apartment, officially ruled a suicide, but clearly the result of the previous night's encounter at the cemetery. General Sanu summoned Ibrahim for what both men understood might be their final official meeting. Captain, events are moving beyond our ability to control them, Sanu said grimly. There are rumors of your investigation being terminated and your arrest being ordered for exceeding authority and compromising national security. Sir, we're on the verge of exposing systematic theft that has cost Burkina Faso hundreds of millions of dollars. Stopping now would be a betrayal of everything we've sworn to protect. I agree completely, which is why I'm giving you 12 hours to complete your investigation before I'm forced to officially suspend your activities. Ibrahim understood the message. Sanu was providing him with a final window to act while maintaining plausible deniability about his knowledge of what Ibrahim might do with that time. Thank you, sir. I won't waste the opportunity. That afternoon, Ibrahim coordinated simultaneously, with Fatima Zongo for media publication, opposition political leaders for legislative action, and international organizations for diplomatic pressure. The evidence of systematic corruption would be released through multiple channels, making it impossible to suppress or deny. As evening approached, Ibrahim received word that military police were en route to arrest him. He had perhaps 30 minutes before his investigation would be terminated permanently. In those final minutes, he completed the transfer of all evidence to secure locations and made one last call to Lieutenant Ouedraogo. "Lieutenant, whatever happens to me, continue this work. The people of Burkina Faso deserve leaders who serve their interests rather than personal greed. Sir, we can arrange for your departure from the country. You've done enough. Let others carry forward the investigation." Ibrahim considered the option briefly. "No, Lieutenant. Running would validate their claims that we were acting improperly. I'll face whatever consequences come from serving my country with integrity." The military. Police arrived at Ibrahim's quarters precisely on schedule. As they placed him in custody, Ibrahim felt no regret for his actions. The evidence was now public. The corruption network was exposed, and the people of Burkina Faso would finally understand how their resources had been stolen from them. 6 months after Ibrahim Traoré's arrest, Burkina Faso had undergone a transformation that few could have predicted. The evidence he had gathered, published simultaneously by multiple media outlets and international organizations, had triggered massive public protests demanding governmental accountability. President Kabore, while not directly implicated in the diamond smuggling, was forced to resign as public confidence collapsed. Emergency elections brought opposition leaders to power, committed to transparency and proper resource management. Captain Marcel Dio was sentenced to 15 years in prison for his role in the smuggling operation. 7 government ministers faced similar sentences, while dozens of other officials were removed from office and faced criminal charges. Ibrahim himself was eventually released and vindicated, his actions recognized as heroic service to his country. He was promoted to colonel and appointed to head a new National Resource Security Agency, tasked with preventing future corruption and ensuring that Burkina Faso's mineral wealth served its people's development needs. Franco-African Mining Corporation faced massive fines and had its operating licenses revoked. The Tambao diamond deposits were placed under direct government control, with revenues dedicated to education, healthcare, and infrastructure development. Perhaps most importantly, Ibrahim's investigation had inspired similar anti-corruption efforts across West Africa. The systematic approach he had developed was adopted by other nations struggling with resource governance challenges. Standing in his new office in Ouagadougou, Colonel Ibrahim Traoré looked out over a city that seemed somehow more hopeful than it had just months before. Construction cranes dotted the skyline as diamond revenues funded new schools and hospitals. Children who might have grown up in poverty now had educational opportunities their parents could never have imagined. The cost of his investigation had been enormous, careers destroyed, political stability threatened, relationships with foreign partners damaged. But the alternative, continued systematic theft of national resources, would have cost far more in terms of lost opportunities for development and prosperity. His secure phone rang, displaying Fatima Zongo's number. "Colonel Traoré, I wanted to congratulate you on the 1-year anniversary of the Bailey River operation. Have you seen the latest development statistics?" Ibrahim smiled, remembering the dusty confrontation that had started everything. "What do they show, Miss Zongo?" "School enrollment up 40%, healthcare access improved by 60%, and foreign direct investment at historic levels as international companies see Burkina Faso as a transparent, stable partner. It seems your diamond convoy interception was rather successful." As Ibrahim ended the call, he reflected on his father's words about a soldier's greatest weapon being his conscience. The lesson had proven accurate, though the path to justice had been far more complex and dangerous than he had initially understood. Outside his window, the sun was setting over Ouagadougou, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that reminded him of the colors of the Burkinabe flag. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Corruption was like a virus that required constant vigilance to prevent its return. But tonight, Colonel Ibrahim Traoré could rest knowing that he had served his country with honor, that the people of Burkina Faso were finally benefiting from their natural resources, and that future generations would inherit a nation where integrity mattered more than personal enrichment. The Diamond Defender had succeeded in his mission, not through military force, but through unwavering commitment to truth and justice. In a continent too often plagued by corruption and exploitation, Burkina Faso had become a beacon of what was possible when leaders chose service over self-interest. The story was far from over. Building sustainable institutions and maintaining transparency would require ongoing effort. But the foundation had been laid, and Ibrahim Traoré had played his part in ensuring that his country's abundant natural resources would finally serve their intended purpose, creating prosperity and opportunity for all citizens of Burkina Faso.